Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today our guest is Rachel Richards. Thanks for being on the show, Rachel.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Whitney.
Rachel retired at age 27 with over $10,000 per month in passive income. And we're going to learn today how she did that and just what passive income is. But she's the author of 2 best-selling books on financial literacy, and real estate investor with almost 40 rental units. So Rachel, thank you again for your time and being on the show with us today. I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. I love stories like this, especially at 27. I mean, that's what everybody dreams about, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. I never imagined I would retire this young, but here we are.
So give us a little more about, that story, or, I know we want to jump into it, but let's go back a little bit. Has real estate always been a dream of yours? Was it something that, that you saw somebody else do when you were a teenager, or, get us started a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, even since a young age, I've been a total finance nerd and really interested in how to create a lot of money. And so I was an avid reader all throughout middle school, high school, college, and I'd learned a lot about real estate investing. And so it's something I always wanted to do. To me, real estate investing is one of the best tools for building long-term wealth. So 2017 is when my journey of creating passive income started. At the beginning of that year, my husband and I had $0 in passive income. So that year we invested in our first rental property. We purchased our first duplex. And then later that year, I wrote and published my first best-selling book, Money Honey. So we had these 2 passive income streams, rental income and royalty income. And we focused on growing those as much as we possibly could over the next few years. So fast forward to today, we now have almost 40 units. And last year, I just launched my second book. So my book royalty income has increased significantly. And that is how I was able to quit my job and retire last year at the age of 27.
Wow. Okay. So, I guess, how did you educate yourself, and what pushed you into real estate at that time? I mean, most people are pursuing some type of career or corporate career, some other type of avenue. What was it for you?
Yeah, I've had a pretty varied background. I started as a financial advisor, but even before then, I was reading tons of books. That's primarily how I learn anything. But then I was licensed in my Series 7, Series 66 license to help people invest. And then I actually took a job in a real estate position where I was working for somebody who was flipping properties. And I took the job because I knew I wanted to do it myself. So I figured this is going to be a great learning experience for me. Ended up getting my own real estate license just for the sake of me purchasing my own investment properties. And that's how I really got into real estate investing.
Okay. So what was it then that, so now, you've got the bug, you're like, okay, we're going to do this. You're educating yourself. I guess first though, give us a couple key things that helped educate you. And even, let's start there. What were you reading? What was educating you to make you take action like that?
I think one of the first books I read about real estate investing was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because he talks about it. And then I was like, this sounds really cool. And then from there, I read all sorts of books. So one of my favorite books about rental property investing specifically is called Hold by Steve Chater and the McKissicks. It's so good. I still use some of their templates to do analysis. So those are some great resources. And then, one of the things you have to be really good at from the get-go is doing your projections and doing your financial analysis. So it's important to have a really great spreadsheet or calculator or some type of resource where you can project out, okay, here's how much I think I'm going to be able to rent the property for. Here's the vacancy. Here's all of the expenses. And then being able to look, the 2 metrics I look at are the cash on cash ROI and the capitalization rate. So I kind of focus on those 2 things and the cash flow. And other investors focus on a lot of other metrics, but in my opinion, those are the 3 main metrics to focus on. So I just think having a good understanding of those, what those are, and being able to accurately project out your rental income and expenses, that's really important.
Okay. Yeah, and projecting things like that. Any other tips for projecting those items? And maybe you could list those again. What you said were most important to you.
Yeah, the rent revenue you have to project. And the way I do that is I basically look on Craigslist and Zillow to see what are the other active rentals to come up with a pretty good estimate. And then I always make it conservative. So if everything else out there that's similar to my property is renting for $800 a month, I'll just be a little conservative and maybe I'll estimate, okay, I can get $775 a month for this unit. Then you have to take into account the vacancy rate as well, because it's not going to be rented 365 days a year. You're going to have some turnover. So you really need to account for that. Most investors use an 8% vacancy rate, which means that the property would be vacant for 1 month out of the year. Now, I think that's very conservative. I'm hoping my properties are never going to be vacant for a month, but I always estimate it that way, that just because it's better to be conservative. And then you have all of your expenses. So this is where a lot of first-time investors make mistakes, is where they estimate their expenses. Because it's easy to think, oh, my rental income minus my mortgage payment, and then that's my profit. And in reality, there are a lot of other expenses out there that you need to think about. For example, utilities and lawn care. Are you going to pay for that, or is the tenant going to pay for that? Also think about things like HOA fees, maintenance and repair, capital expenditures. And I always tell people you have to budget in an expense for a property manager, because most likely, most of us don't want to quit our jobs to become full-time landlords, right? And to make rental income truly passive, you have to have a property manager in place. Even if you're not going to hire one from the get-go, just budget that in to make sure the numbers will still work. So that's kind of what I start with to estimate my net cash flow. And then from there, I like to look at the cash on cash ROI, which basically takes your annual profit divided by your initial investment. And that is an important metric for me, because I want to at least be able to beat the stock market. To me, it's kind of like, what's the point of investing if I'm not going to get a higher return than what I could get in the stock market? So I've always aimed for a minimum of a 12% cash on cash ROI.
Okay, I was going to ask you what that would be, or what that figure would be. So to $10,000 a month in passive income, is that all from rentals or mostly rentals?
So it's actually closer to $15,000 a month now, but I would say in a normal month, not during coronavirus, but in a normal month, we are profiting anywhere from $7,000 to $12,000 per month from the rentals. And then my book royalties make up the other big chunk. So in February, I just had my first $7,000 month in book royalties.
Congratulations to you. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. So what about, getting to that point though, on the rental side, how did you, a lot of people have trouble, especially buying the first one, right? But then, the second or the third or the fourth, how did you make that happen? Did you all have the capital, say, to put down? Did you have investors? What did that look like?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'll kind of rewind back to college. Have you heard of Cutco cutlery, Cutco knives?
No, I have not.
Okay, so they are knives made in America, and it's a direct sales company. So I was selling Cutco knives all throughout college to pay for school, because I knew I was going to pay for it on my own. And I was able to graduate without debt because of that. And then my husband is a Navy veteran, and so he used his military benefits to pay for his college. So we both graduated and didn't have any debt. And that was really important to get us started in terms of being able to save a lot of money. Now, I haven't received an inheritance. I've never made six figures. So it's not about making a ton of money necessarily. It's just about living frugally. Even when I was making $32,000 after college, after I graduated, I was still finding a way to save 50% of my income. So I was able to save money pretty quickly just by being frugal. So it didn't take long for my husband and I to amass a certain amount of money to buy our first property. The other thing we had going for us is that we were investing in Louisville, Kentucky. And that's a great place to invest anywhere in the Midwest. Housing prices are cheap. It's a low cost of living. So our first duplex only cost $100,000. And my husband and I, we both put 10 grand each in. So that was our $20,000 down payment. And then the third thing going for us, and this is really how we were able to scale and get to almost 40 units in a period of 2 or 3 years, is that I had my real estate license. And I only had it for my own purposes to represent myself as my own buyer's agent. But the great thing about that is that every time we purchased a property, I would then get a really large commission check back from being my own agent. So after the duplex, I got a check for several $1,000s. Then we continued to save the way we were already saving, and we had the additional cash flow. So it didn't take long once we started going to sort of gain momentum and be able to buy properties quickly and more quickly after that.
So that it's left me. What do you call that? The commission. Sorry,
Yeah.
The commission that you would receive from buying your own properties ultimately would help you to help have a down payment for the next property.
Yeah, I mean, we would kind of deplete our savings to buy the property. Then I would get this commission check back, and that would begin the process of savings again. So it just gave us a lot of momentum to purchase the next one pretty fast.
So are there any specific details about the properties you were looking for them to be able to cash flow that quickly as well?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you always look for is location. And there were certain locations that I thought were appreciating and growing, really good opportunities to invest in Louisville. So I kind of narrowed it down to that first. And then it was just all about the numbers. Whatever worked within my guidelines, I would be willing to make an offer on. So again, I had my cash on cash ROI requirement was at least 12%. And we were able to get, I think, a 15% ROI on our first property. But as we've continued to grow and scale and purchase larger properties, our requirements have gone up a little bit because it's been easier as we've scaled up. And then the other requirement that I wanted was at least $200 in cash flow per door, like in profit per door per month. And again, these numbers are great. I'm investing in Louisville, Kentucky. You can't, get these numbers everywhere across the country, but it's great to invest in the Midwest. The first duplex we purchased, we were cash flowing right off the bat $500 per month, so $250 per door. And we did a renovation and everything. And just a couple years later now, it is cash flowing closer to $800 or $900 per month. So it's really been a great investment for us.
Good for you.
Thanks.
So you mentioned earlier living frugally, and I think, a lot of people say that, but could you give some examples of maybe, because people don't realize maybe the struggle or some sacrifices that a lot of people make to ultimately reach success. Right.
Yeah.
And having that long-term picture in mind, and people think it's going to happen tomorrow. My wife and we've experienced the same thing. And so I just wonder, from your standpoint, what that looked like for you and your husband, and maybe some other sacrifices or struggles that you all had to make or work through to make this happen.
Yeah, it was a lot of sacrifice. Before I met my husband and I was still single, I was living off, so I was making $32,000 and saving 50% of that. So I was living probably as cheaply as you could. One of the things I did is I went on some of these room finding websites, and I found somebody who was just renting out a room and a bathroom, and I rented from them directly. And so I was paying $400 or $450 per month flat for my housing and utilities. So that was super, super cheap. And yes, I don't have all my own space, but it was perfect to do early on. I also didn't have a gym membership, so I was just working out on my own, running outside, doing push-ups and squats and all those things inside. And in terms of eating out, I pretty much never was going out to restaurants. And if I did, sometimes I was that crazy person out with my coworkers or friends, and I would just drink water and I wouldn't eat or drink anything. And I know that sounds bizarre, and I know not everyone's going to be willing to go that extreme, but at certain times in my life, I was willing to be that extreme, and I just didn't care what people thought. And I'm glad I did that then, because now I can enjoy a much higher quality of life now. And then later on, when Andrew and I met, my husband and I met, the sacrifice was less on the finance side and more on the time side, because we were both working full time. We were looking for rental properties and managing our rental properties on the weekends. And I was writing my books in the evenings. So for probably a period of 2 years, we were both working 80-hour weeks. That was, to me, a much bigger sacrifice, because it meant not as much time with our family and friends, not as much quality time together. In some ways, it could have been better, I think, if we'd slowed down a little bit. But, now that we're financially independent and enjoying this lifestyle now, it's hard not to say that it wasn't worth it because we have a lot of freedom now, and that's been great.
I can relate to that 100%. I'm glad you brought that up. Just the sacrifice on the time side, and I think that's financially is the sacrifice that most people first think of. Right. You don't
Yeah.
think of the time commitment, and working at 80 hours a week and really committing to that. Are you willing to do that, and thinking through, ahead of time. But let's jump in a little bit to the, I know you mentioned importance of income diversification and what passive income really is. And I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, for sure. So passive income, the way I define it is that it's money that is earned with little to no ongoing effort. So it's no get rich quick scheme. As we've both already said, it does take time or money to create. But once you have your passive income in place, then it becomes a lot more hands off. And I had this epiphany several years ago that once your passive income exceeds your living expenses, you're retired, you're financially independent. So that's what we started working towards. I think that there is a common piece of advice or just statement that's said to young people that I don't agree with. And that is that having a full-time salaried position equates to job stability and income security. I don't agree with that because if you are 100% dependent on a single source of income, that's not secure. What happens when you lose your job, when your hours get reduced? And we're seeing this happen now in the middle of this coronavirus crisis. So that's where I talk about the concept of income diversification. And this just means having multiple sources of income. That way, when one of your income streams is impacted, you still have other things to fall back on. And I'm the perfect living example of this right now because my rental income has been significantly impacted from coronavirus. And in a normal month, I think I said we make anywhere from $7 to $12 a month in profit from our rentals. In April, we only made $1,000. Now, there's a lot of landlords.
That's significant.
A significant loss, yeah. There's a lot of landlords that are worse off than that. There's a lot of landlords that are doing better than that. But the way I saw it at the time is, hey, if I just break even for a few months and that's my worst case scenario, I'm totally fine with that. And, since April, our incomes jumped way back up. So, but the thing is, I wasn't in a total panic in April that I had lost all that income because I had 3 other passive income streams keeping me afloat. And I just think that's a perfect lesson of why income diversification is so important. You never want to be operating out of a place of panic or desperation. So just try to do what you can do now to get other income streams in place.
No, that's such good advice. Such good advice. Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more about just people thinking that their job is secure. There's security in that. And I was raised that way. To think that you have a good education, you get a good career, go up the corporate path, and that way it's secure. But like you said, I think a lot of people have learned just over the last few months that that job is not as secure as you may think. Some big mistakes. You mentioned some big mistakes potentially that you've made over the last few years. Maybe you can highlight a few of those before we have to move to some final questions.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty funny. It's hard not to be hard on yourself and after the fact because I look back and I'm like, what was I thinking? I mean, that seemed so obvious. But my biggest mistake was hiring my property managers. I learned that this is not a place to be cheap and to skimp. So we had this couple that was working for us for our rentals. They were doing cleaning, some of the maintenance, just some oddball jobs for us. They were the hardest working people I have literally ever met. They always went above and beyond, always had great attitudes and everything. So the very first property manager we hired, she just didn't work out because she wasn't doing a good enough job, and that's fine. And then we decided, well, let's try to hire this couple. We kind of weren't going to do the property management company thing because we figured we can hire a real estate agent or hire a couple people as employees, be a little bit more hands-on with them that way, and be able to pay less money than a property management company would cost. So we hired this couple. They were really excited about the opportunity. Everything started off great, of course. And then, fast forward 6 months later, and my husband went to the lock boxes to collect rent one Saturday morning. And he noticed there was a lot of rent missing. And it wasn't just the normal, oh, this tenant is late type thing. There was a lot of rent missing. So of course we called them. They totally just disappeared. It was about $6,000 of rent that was stolen, that they stole and they left that weekend. And then we found out that they had been squatting in vacant rooms on our property for at least an entire year and stole our master key. We had to get every door in every property rekeyed. So the total damages were like 20 grand, and there's a warrant out for their arrest, of course. But I'll tell you this, I can laugh about it now genuinely, because it's like, it's almost funny, but at the time it definitely was not fun at all. And it was a big learning lesson for me, because there are places where, yes, like try to be cheap, try to be frugal, but then there are places where it's absolutely worth it to spend more money. And I learned that property management is one of them. Because here's the thing, if we had hired a property management company and they were licensed and bonded and insured, and one of their employees did that to us, they would have been on the line, not us. And instead, we're out that money. So I bring that up now because it's a little bit embarrassing, but it's always good to say it for other people that are new to investing, to just learn. Learn from my mistakes. Don't make the same mistakes, please.
Wow. No, I appreciate you sharing that. I was going to ask you how you keep that from happening now, but do you all hire a professional management company now moving forward?
Yeah, we're in the process of interviewing them. In the meantime, I have a family member back home that I trust completely. So anything that we need them on site for, like signing a lease, they're going to go do that until we can get a company in place.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's hard. It's a hard lesson, no doubt about it.
It is. The way I see it is, wow, I paid a lot of money to learn this lesson, and that's great. That was my investment in my education.
Yeah. Yeah. So I meant to ask you too earlier, working 80 hours a week is not easy, especially after you all are married and you're doing all this and you're both hustling as hard as you can go, right? How did you stay motivated? How did you both stay on board, moving forward with this?
Oh gosh, I'm really glad you asked, because there were some really, really hard times with this. And I think any entrepreneur or business owner can relate to that feeling of burnout, because the thing is, once I quit my full-time job, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to have so much time. And then the opposite of that happened, and I was working even more, because when you're going into a job, you go in at 8 and you leave the office at 5 and you go home. And there's these clear boundaries of when your workday starts and ends. When you're working for yourself or you're an investor or business owner, you don't have those boundaries anymore. So it becomes a lot more difficult to have, start and end times to your workday. And not only that, but with my book business specifically, it's my passion and it's what I love to do. So after I quit my job and I was spending my time doing that, I was like, wow, I could do this 12 hours a day and be totally happy. Like, this is great. So I've had to be a lot more protective of my time. There definitely were times throughout that journey that I suffered from anxiety and burnout. And I really had to get clear on prioritizing my mental health over anything else. So one resource that really helped me through that dark time that was pretty hard is the book The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. I'm a huge Hal Elrod fan, and I actually feature him in my book, Passive Income Aggressive Retirement. But, Hal talks about the importance of a morning routine and how starting your day intentionally and with positivity can impact your day over and over again. And when you have great days over and over again, that can change your life. So I started doing some of those things: meditation, affirmations, journaling, and that's really helped me stay centered and be able to prioritize what's the most important.
Any other things as far as prioritizing your mental health that you could help us with?
Yeah, one experiment that I do on a regular basis is I track my time. Have you ever done this?
No, please explain.
Oh gosh,
I've tracked my time a little bit, but probably not the way you're going to say it.
It's horrifying. So it's eye-opening. But when I was dealing with anxiety, I decided I had actually gone to a conference. I saw Hal Elrod speak. He's been really public about his struggles with anxiety as well. And he said, I had to learn to put my values, which for him and for me both were health, family, and freedom. He was like, I had to learn to put that above anything else. So one thing he said was, when his kids' school schedules came out the following year, he started canceling speaking contracts and canceling engagements, something he had never done before. But he was like, I have to commit to living 100% in alignment with my values. And to hear him have the courage to do that, that was really monumental for me. And I finally felt like I had the permission to to say that I'm in complete control of my time. So coming out of that, I did this exercise where I tracked my time in 15-minute intervals, and I looked at all the different things I was spending my time on. And then I looked at my values, which were my health, my family, and freedom. And I looked to see which one of those activities was meeting all those values and which activity was not meeting any of the values. And that was extremely interesting to see the results on this page that I had written up. For example, meditation was something that added to every single value. Watching TV did not have anything to do with my values. So my husband and I decided to do an experiment where we stopped watching TV for 30 days. And just that one thing had more of an impact on our well-being and our marriage than anything else, because we replaced that time with quality time or doing actual meaningful things or just resting and recharging. So yeah, that's been a huge activity. I recommend every entrepreneur do that, like a quarterly exercise.
What do you use to track your time? Do you use an app or do you just write it down?
I just write it down. I'm old fashioned. I just write it down on a piece of paper or in my bullet journal, which is my favorite resource.
Great advice, Rachel. I think we lose so much time, don't we, just messing around or doing other things. You don't realize it if you don't write it down or track it in some way. Mm-hmm. So just a few final questions. What's a way that you've recently improved your business other than property management that we can apply to ours?
I would just say you have to really discern between what's an actual emergency and what's not when dealing with tenants. And oftentimes tenants will come to us with problems. Here's the biggest thing that you can say to your tenants that will just totally change things, especially if you're managing your own properties. You can ask them, what do you want me to do about it? And I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean that in a genuine way. Like, hey, so-and-so, what do you want me to do? How can I help? Because once they actually think through that, a lot of the times they'll be like, yeah, actually, I don't know if there's anything you can do. And we'll be like, okay. Because a lot of the times tenants will call you just to vent or complain about another person in the building. So if you can just say, hey, yeah, that's what can I do? How can I help? Then a lot of times they'll be like, oh, well, I don't really know if there's anything you can do. That solves 80% of our problems, just that one question. So I would say ask that and just really understand what's an emergency and what's not and protect your time.
What's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Knowing when to turn to people for help or to pay money for help. Because as a perfectionist, I'm a control freak. I'm a type A person. I tend to want to do everything myself. And that has really held me back in certain areas in my life. So I've had to overcome some of these limiting beliefs and these mental obstacles, and also be okay with spending money, because you have to spend money for help and to outsource things. But knowing that if you do that, you're opening up your time for bigger and better things. And that's ultimately a really, really great investment. So I think that's been the biggest thing.
And how do you like to give back?
There's a charity that I donate to called Front Row Foundation, and I love it. It's kind of like Make-A-Wish. Make-A-Wish is for, giving children experiences if they're near end of life. And Front Row Foundation does the same thing, but with people of all ages. So it's a really great charity.
Rachel, I'm grateful for your time. Pleasure to have met you. It's been great to hear your story. I love these stories of, just people who have made it happen. And even if it took 80 hours a week, and not downplaying it. I mean, telling us exactly, just how difficult that was and some sacrifices you all had to make, even up to how you prioritize your mental health, and which I agree is so important. But tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you, learn more about you, and also learn more about your books.
Yeah, thanks, Whitney. So both of my books are available on Amazon and Audible, Money Honey and Passive Income, Aggressive Retirement. So they're in ebook, paperback, and audio. And then I will give your listeners my Passive Income Starter Kit for free. So if they want to sign up for that, you can go to moneyhoneyrachel.com/bonus.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.